This is a story about a review that couldn't survive contact with reality, and a reviewer who couldn't survive contact with accountability. For weeks, the reviewer held firm, dismissing critics, performing principled integrity on Twitter, finding the whole thing amusing. Players pushed back. Peers pushed back. The math pushed back. 77 critic consensus, 8.8 from 11,000 players. IGN sitting nearly 2 standard deviations below the professional mean in the bottom 2 to 5% of all critic outcomes for this game. And through all of it, he remained immovable. Then, the pressure became impossible to ignore. And in the way IGN only ever moves when it has no other choice, grudgingly, minimally, with ego fully intact, he conceded that a re-review is probably warranted. Not that he was wrong, not that the players were right. Probably warranted. That is the backpedal. And the way he's been conducting himself while doing it is what this video is about. We've written extensively about the quantity of his review in previous essays. The full breakdown lives there, and we won't relitigate it here. What's worth noting is this. When the primary complaints underpinning a professional score can be patched away within 9 days of launch, that timeline tells you everything you need to know about the depth of the thinking behind it. The bones of this game were never touched by a single patch, because they never needed to be. And while all of this was unfolding, while the patches were dropping, while the players were responding, while the market was correcting, this is what the reviewer posted on Twitter, which, believe it or not, is the least preposterous thing he has posted that we will go through in this video. But it establishes just what kind of character we have to endure as the gaming community. I enjoy a good debate, TBH. Plus, the comments never fail to amuse me. This is a man who has spent weeks absorbing overwhelming public feedback, from players, from peers, from the market itself. And his response is that the comments amuse him. Not that they gave him pause. Not that he looked at the math, the patch timeline, the peer consensus, and wondered even briefly whether the problem might not be millions of people, but one review, and the person who wrote it. Here is the thing about someone who reviews other people's work for a living. The moment the public turns around and applies the same scrutiny to their work, with data, with peer comparison, with documented real-world consequences, the intellectual honesty they perform so loudly in their own writing should demand they apply that same standard inward. Instead, what we get is amusement. Someone who has decided they are permanently on the right side of the table, the one doing the judging, never the one being judged. Going through every tweet, every reply, every carefully worded defense deployed since this controversy began, there is a pattern. Not one defense, not two, but a whole architecture of deflection layered deliberately, each one designed to ensure accountability cannot land from any angle. Starting with the most revealing deflection of all, "It's just my opinion." 4 words deployed as a force field against any and all scrutiny. And he didn't just imply this, he built an entire Twitter thread around it. When someone told him his job is to inform gamers whether a game is worth purchasing, and that being wrong repeatedly disqualifies him from that job, his response was this: "Reviews are opinions. Anyone can give one. He just happens to get paid for his. And if you don't like it, don't read his reviews." Let's be clear about something. Nobody is reading his review because of him. Nobody even knows who he is. They are reading it because of the IGN badge above his name, the badge that gives his score disproportionate Metacritic weighting over 11,000 user ratings, the badge that developer bonus structures are tied to, the badge that institutional investors monitor, the badge that sent Pearl Abyss's stock cratering 29% in a single day, wiping out market value on a company that spent 7 years and $133 million building this game, with real investors losing real money in the millions before the stock eventually recovered. And only because 4 million players proved the review wrong, not because the critics corrected themselves. The recovery is not the exoneration. The recovery is the indictment. And this man thinks of all of that as just his personal opinion. That is how he views his job. That is the framework he brings to one of the most consequential review positions in the largest gaming outlet in the world by reach, by influence, and by Metacritic weighting. Consider what that means in any other professional context. An auditor reviewing a company's financial health operates under standards that exist precisely to separate a qualified professional assessment from a personal gut feeling. Those standards are not bureaucratic excess. They are the entire basis of the authority the audit carries. An auditor who looked at those standards and said, "It's just my opinion," would be struck off and removed from the profession permanently. A game critic operates under exactly the same principle, or should. Without a transparent framework, there is no review. There is only an opinion with a badge attached, wielding power it was never asked to justify. And then someone in that thread made precisely this point, that journalistic integrity requires a scorecard, a methodology, a transparent framework, separating personal taste from structured professional evaluation. His response was 7 words. "You're describing an opinion with extra steps." No wonder the reviews coming out of this operation land so catastrophically outside every quantifiable measure of quality. Peer comparison, player feedback, market response, sales data. Against every single metric that exists to evaluate whether a professional judgment was accurate, this review failed. And his response to all of it is to retreat further behind the opinion shield. If his review is just his personal opinion, just one man's subjective take, then he should be a YouTuber. Nobody is stopping him. But the moment you operate under the IGN banner, wielding Metacritic weight that moves stock prices and shapes publishing deals, you are not representing your opinion anymore. You are representing an institution. And institutions have standards. And crucially, as we will show, this is not just about him. This is about how IGN as a company is being run. The individual is the symptom. The institution is the disease. But we'll get there. Then comes the martyr escalation. He said, let's be precise, that he'd rather lose his job than pump out craven work. Nobody threatened his job. The question on the table was whether his review accurately reflected the game's quality, whether his analysis held up under scrutiny, whether the score he assigned was proportionate to what Pearl Abyss actually built. He answered that question by constructing a more dramatic version of the conflict, one where he's a principled truth-teller, refusing to compromise his integrity under siege, and then defended himself against that invented version with considerable passion. That is not integrity. That is a straw man dressed in integrity's clothing. When that fails to land, the next layer deploys. Disqualify the critics entirely. Paranoid conspiracists who've never worked in the industry. If you have never written a professional game review, your disagreement is illegitimate by definition. Your analysis doesn't count. Your evidence doesn't count. Your 11,000 Metacritic user ratings don't count either. And here is the rich irony of that position. Every independent gaming channel on YouTube earns its audience the hard way, post by post, take by take, with the community deciding in real time whether the analysis is worth watching. Their credibility is held up to scrutiny every single upload. Nobody watches them because of an institution they represent. They watch because the work earns it. He has it completely backwards. The independent voices he dismisses are the ones actually being held accountable by their audience daily, while he hides behind an institutional badge that investors and publishers defer to, not because his work has earned that deference, but because they assume an outlet this large must have standards. And as every post in these threads has demonstrated, that assumption is the biggest irony of all. The institution with the most reach has the least accountability. And the most telling exchange of all comes when someone points out directly that he criticized Marathon's UI and inventory system in his own review. The exact same categories of complaint he used to justify Crimson Desert's 6, yet gave Marathon a 9. His response? Reviews aren't math, it's opinion. This again. The default shield. Every single time accountability arrives at the door, regardless of the question, regardless of the evidence, regardless of how precise the contradiction being pointed at, the answer is always the same. It's just my opinion. Whatever this man is feeling that particular day, about that particular game, in that particular mood. Stamped with the IGN badge and fed into a Metacritic aggregate that moves stock markets and shapes an industry. And when someone pushed further, suggesting that a critic representing a global brand shouldn't be making personal taste declarations, but evaluating whether a game succeeds at what it's trying to do and who it's for, his response was that a negative review is basically just saying the game isn't for you. He just told you what IGN's negative reviews are. Personal taste declarations. Nothing more, nothing less. Then comes the final layer. The one designed to make the entire architecture look reasonable from the outside. A re-review is probably warranted, he says. Not because his original review failed every qualitative and quantitative metric available. Not because his complaints dissolved within 9 days. But because the game has new updates. His original position still stands. Every complaint he made, he maintains, was valid at the time. This is not open-mindedness. This is the most sophisticated defense of all. Using the re-review framework as a shield for an original judgment that has been demolished by peer consensus, player feedback, market response, and sales data simultaneously. And honestly, we've heard enough from him and his reviews. He can save it. The gaming community has already delivered its verdict, and it looks nothing like a 6 out of 10. But here is where the entire thing unravels. Because across multiple threads, he admitted that he would have given Veilguard a completely different score to the reviewer who actually covered it, and then defended that reviewer by saying people are allowed to like different things, and we should embrace that. Read those two positions together. When his own score is challenged, it's a principled institutional verdict that nobody has the right to question. When a colleague's completely different score is challenged, it's personal taste, and we should celebrate it. The authority of the badge is real when it protects him. The shelter of subjectivity is real when it protects his colleagues. Whichever one is convenient, whichever one lands. This is not one man's personal contradiction. This is the operating philosophy of an institution that has spent decades wielding Metacritic power with one hand, while hiding behind, "It's just my opinion," with the other. The opinion shield isn't a personality quirk. It's institutional policy. And it has been for a very long time. So let's be precise about what he just confessed. The same game assigned to a different person would have produced a completely different score, carrying the identical IGN brand authority, the identical Metacritic weighting, the identical capacity to move Pearl Abyss's stock 29% in a single day. All of it resting on nothing more than whoever happened to be assigned that week and whatever taste they walked in with that morning. No standard, no framework, no consistency, no reliability, no accountability. And just to complete the picture, this same reviewer stands by his assessment that Concord was a more consistently enjoyable game than Crimson Desert. Concord, the game pulled from sale within 2 weeks of launch. The game that became a case study in catastrophic failure. More enjoyable, in his taste, than a game with 4 million sales, a thriving community, and cultural momentum no marketing budget could manufacture. If this is the quality of taste informing professional reviews at the largest gaming outlet in the world, if this is the critical compass being used to assign scores that move stock markets and determine developer bonuses, then IGN has a far more serious problem than one bad review. They have a hiring problem. They have a standards problem. They have a fundamental question to answer about what kind of analytical mind they consider qualified to wield institutional authority over an industry worth hundreds of billions of dollars. He said earlier he'd rather lose his job than compromise his integrity. And here is the bitter irony of that statement. Genuine integrity in this situation would demand exactly that. Owning a judgment this catastrophically misaligned with every measurable standard of professional accuracy, acknowledging it publicly, accepting the consequence. That is what integrity actually looks like when it functions. Instead, what we get is the performance of integrity, the dramatic declaration, while the actual cost of it is carefully avoided at every turn. In games journalism, apparently, you get to claim the principle without paying the price. And IGN, the largest gaming outlet in the world by reach, by influence, by Metacritic weighting, just told you, through their own reviewer's mouth, that they don't believe they owe you the standards to change that. That's not games journalism. That's a circus. And as always, thank you to everyone who has subscribed, commented, liked, donated, and joined the membership recently. I'm truly humbled and grateful. I've been considering branching out with the content. Let me know if you want me to cover game news, industry analysis, or anything else. Drop your suggestions below. That's it from me until the next one. Peace.